Welcome to the first episode of Setting the Hook, an exploration of how authors start their novels. It's often been said that publishers know within the first chapter if they're going to have any interest in a specific story. My opinion is that this is way more true for web novels, because with a web novel, there's no sunk cost fallacy where you've already put some money into something and are therefore committed to it or have that gut feeling of being committed to it. There's just so many web novels on a site like Royal Road that, if you're not hooking the reader right off the bat, you'd certainly risk losing. That is going to be the intention of this series. And beyond just that exploration of what makes a first chapter awesome, we're also going to be trying to just shine a spotlight on some stories that are on Royal Road that you may or may not have heard of and that maybe are worth you checking out. Maybe you're going to find your new favorite web novel right here on this series. This series is not meant to be a comprehensive review of these fictions. What you will be able to find is how people are able to capture your attention, and often in that first chapter, you're going to get an idea of the author's writing style, the tone, and you're going to see if those kind of hooks and seeds are planted in the reader's mind to make them want to keep turning the page. So with that said, let's jump into it. The format for this, each episode, I am going to pick 3 submissions from the thread that I posted on the forums on Royal Road. If you're interested in having your fiction reviewed or spotlighted or whatnot on this series, go ahead and go to that link in the description and submit your story. So let's jump into it. Let's look at the first 3 stories that I picked from the submissions to look at. And I tried to get a diverse selection this time so that, we're not just getting lit RPG, or we're not just getting slice of life, or we're not just getting mystery or whatnot. But I wanted this to be an exploration of, different styles, because I know every reader is different, myself included, on what they personally enjoy reading. So without further ado, let's get into episode 1 of Setting the Hook. Our very first pick to kick things off is what I would describe as the bread and butter of Royal Road. This is an epic lit RPG. You've got stats, progressing, you've got epic fight scenes, and you have a quest that promises to take the reader across the world on quite an adventure. So what we have here is a title called Enmida, Return of the White Sun by Hemoth. Now, in this story, it begins with Deimos, and he is drifting through a formless void, mortally wounded, broken, and hopeless. But it's not all bad for Deimos, despite being mortally wounded, broken, and hopeless. But the voice of a goddess reaches out to him, and she transfers her powers to him and sends him back into the world that is in need of a hero. Sounds like a pretty spicy start, right? Who doesn't want to be returned to the world with the powers of a goddess and to become a hero? Unfortunately for Deimos, the goddess's evil sister Eris shows up, punishing her sister, then sending nightmarish monsters, known as Macabre, into the world after him. Because it can never be easy, can it, for our protagonists? So when Deimos awakens in the mortal world, he's lost his memory, as tends to happen often in these kinds of things. Thinking Titus Final Fantasy X, one of my personal favorites. But he remembers one thing: he needs to save the princess. Okay, so that's as much as I'm going to give you. If you want to learn more, go ahead and follow that link and just read into it. And we're going to get into the review portion of this. All right, so the pros of this story. This story has a fast-paced plot with very, very well-written fight scenes. They're punchy, they move quickly, and they're very vivid and easy to imagine in your head. I was finding myself really enjoying these fight scenes. It has a super cool cover. I mean, I know we're always told we shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but this one is badass, okay? So I was immediately interested in learning more about this one. Yeah, so take that for what you will. Third pro, one word, guys, epic. The writing style is grand and dark and just straight up epic in tone. You know, you have lots of goddesses and realms without mercy, voices slithering in the dark, people vanishing and swirls of smoke. Just awesome magic stuff that you tend to expect from these sorts of lit RPG like epic stories. Not a light-hearted story where the narrator is sort of playful at all in that kind of way, at least yet in this first chapter. The tone is just very epic, and so if you are into that kind of thing, I think you will love this one. The final pro, the start of the story plants seeds of what's to come. It just makes you want to keep reading to find out how Deimos is going to acclimate to this mortal world 500 years after he has last been to it. And so I think that is a really cool plot device and like writing tool, is setting the world up so that Deimos, the main character, can sort of discover this world and how it's changed along with the reader. So I think that's a really interesting tool and maybe something that you might implement in your own writing. The first and only con for this one is a formatting thing, and it just took me a minute to get in the swing of things and start processing it and understanding and be like, okay, and then it just was, you know, something I wasn't even conscious of, and I was just in the flow reading it. But I've been recently reading a lot of traditionally published fantasy. You know, I just finished Joe Abercrombie's The Devils, and then I read Robert Jackson Bennett's The Tainted Cup. And so these are just things that have like a more traditional novel structure of like writing, how this, and but when I say that, I'm talking about, you know, the paragraph structures and just kind of the way the words look and are laid out on the page. This has a more traditional web novel style, which is generally sort of like a break between every line. And that was a little bit jarring for me at first, but like I was saying, about halfway through the first chapter, it just like started to click for me. And I was like, okay, this is nice. And now I'm just in the flow, and it's super digestible because it's just line break, line break, line break. You're just kind of like, really, you can read that quickly and digest it quickly. And I would also say, maybe this is also a pro for some readers, because I would imagine that this makes it very accessible on mobile devices. So maybe that's kind of the thought process here. Okay, so that is our first fiction reviewed here. I hope that you enjoyed that little chat about my impressions of it. And if you're interested and any of that stuff sounds cool to you, maybe go down to the description and click that. And why don't you dive in and see what you think? Okay, so the second title, number 2, that we're gonna be looking at today is called Stars Dancing by Ayla Arcana. And let me just say that cozy romantasy isn't a genre I typically dive into. I did read Legends and Lattes, Fourth Wing, A Court of Thorns and Roses, but I don't consider myself at all well-versed in this area. So with my background as a reader in mind, I'm here to tell you that Stars Dancing has one hell of a first chapter. It begins with Dr. Rist Nova, and she wakes up in a hospital after she finds herself a victim of domestic violence. Her injuries are intense, but fortunately, she finds herself in the warm care of her colleagues at Jensen University Hospital. If you, like me, don't typically read these genres, you should still give it a shot, and let me tell you why. Because based on this first chapter, Ayla is a very skilled storyteller. So let's jump into the pros and cons, and I'll tell you a little bit more about why I think that. Very first pro in this one, Ayla very easily could have started the story with a fight and Rist waking up at the hospital. Instead, we get some short excerpts of world building at the beginning. Now, dropping world building at the start of a novel is a dangerous thing to do oftentimes, because if you're not very careful, you risk losing the reader and their interest just right off the bat. I think we've all been there. We've read something and you're just like, okay, I don't know these characters and I'm just getting all of this lore dumped on me. And I don't care about it yet because I don't know the characters. I don't know what the stakes are. So who cares about all of this lore? And I think often as writers, we can get very excited about the lore. You know, we've done so much workshopping and filled spreadsheets and Word docs and notebooks with all of this detail. But we have to be really careful, I think, about how we drip feed that to readers, usually. But that is not the case here. Here, Ayla masterfully gives us just, I don't know, maybe it's one paragraph, a paragraph and a sentence, something like that. Not too much at all, but she sets a very, very vivid hook to the world building here. She talks of humans from Earth who discover the ability to traverse the stars, and the very first thing that they encounter when they leave their planet, solar system, whatnot, is a coalition of other galaxies who immediately stop them and say, hey, our coalition of galaxies are a peaceful, utopian place where we have evolved beyond war, beyond weapons, and we would like the Earth to be a part of that. And I don't know about you, but I sure would like to live in that sort of a future. So right off the start, that seemed very interesting to me and kind of hooked me, got my attention. The second pro, so the hospital and medical lingo here that Ayla uses, it made me immediately wonder if the author was a doctor in real life or just did a bunch of research. It feels very immersive, and because of that, things like neurosurgeons, OBGYNs, skull fractures with subdural hematomas, it just was like, someone did their research or has a knowledge of these things, I would think. Or maybe they just watched a lot of Grey's Anatomy, I don't know. But it came across that way where I felt super immersed because I'll admit, I'm not a smart man, but being immersed in this sort of stuff is one of the great joys of reading, I think, is being immersed in something that's outside of your day-to-day. So the final pro in this one is with all of this traumatic stuff happening to Dr. Riss, she sure seems like she could use a vacation, right? Well, the author sets up the perfect hook here at the end of the chapter by telling us about a mysterious planet called Sherwin. It's a peaceful place with the best chocolate, coffee, pastries, you name it, they have the best of it. And no photos or video are allowed to be shared from Sherwin. So it's just this mysterious place. What a hook, right? Who doesn't want to experience some mysterious vacation planet? And Sherwin is like Fight Club, and we all know the rules for Fight Club. Except for I would assume there's no fighting there because they're a peaceful place. Okay, so to the cons for this one. This will be short. There's not much to say for cons. I was super impressed by this chapter. The writing, the prose was really nice, very flowy, but also really did a great job of getting us into the headspace of this character who had just like suffered so much. One tiny thing, and it's likely just my lack of understanding or perhaps me missing a detail, but the intro world building explains how there's no murder in this utopian known cosmos, but then the story begins with Dr. Riss's husband attempting to murder her by smashing her head into a counter. That small detail had me just maybe a little bit confused. But I think that it might have been fueled by some sort of drug or something like that. So yeah, I'm sure that that kind of stuff still happens. It might have just been talking more of like war and violence on like a interplanetary level is what they had evolved beyond. The other little minor con I will say is, to me, this cover is a bit blah. The writing in this one was probably my favorite of the three in this first episode, but if I hadn't read the blurb and had only seen the cover on the Royal Road homepage, I don't think I would have clicked it, honestly. It just seems kind of like a generic space cover. Obviously the classic Royal Road anime AI art probably doesn't fit this fiction, but I do think that it deserves better than the generic space cover. And I think that would probably allow it to, have a little more appeal to more people and hook more people and get them to see how beautiful the writing is. All right, so the third and final fiction reviewed for this very first episode is one called Kijimin by Soaring Moon. Now this fiction begins with Temura, who is bored of living at home with her overprotective mother. She dreams of an adventurous life aboard the aeroships that soar above in the clouds. Fortunately for her, she's ready to start her first year at military academy, the very first step to claiming the life that she desires. Let's get into the prose. This was a good, solid hook, just to kind of set immediately with her longing for a better life, a different life than kind of the boring one that she lives. And then it immediately gets us into okay, well, how can she do that? And that is answered by her immediately starting her first year at military academy. So I think that's perfect. They established what she wants, and then they make her proactive in the sense that shows us how she can get there. Next pro for this one. Really beautiful descriptive language. I found myself enjoying the imagery painted by Soaring Moon. Things like lanterns lighting aeroship decks, gorgeous flowers she had never seen, and a city built along a mountainside. Just very vivid, descriptive writing that I found very nice. It was very kind of poetic and flowery. It was nice. It felt a little bit reminiscent of The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett that I just finished reading. And it's a super different story, so I'm not saying they're the similar plots at all, but just the writing in both is a little bit poetic and literary, which is very nice. Another pro, there's little seeds of mystery planted early, which leave a reader curious. I think that Soaring Moon might have done one of the best jobs of these first three in planting these little seeds of mystery. And it doesn't have to be big things, it doesn't have to be paragraphs explaining these, but just small little sentences here and there that, kind of leave the reader thinking, I wonder what's up with that. So some of those things were her father who had been missing for 15 years, or vicious sky pirates, or a mention of radicals at Fraction. Who are the radicals? What makes them so radical? What is the Fraction? If you're like me, you were curious, when you read something like that. And it makes you want to just kind of keep turning the pages to find out for yourself. The very last pro has a really neat anime style cover artwork that I think is probably very appealing on Royal Road especially. It had me curious at a first glance. I think the typography is very nice too. It's a cool glowing Kijimin thing. A few cons here, and very minor, as with all three of these. They were all awesome. But one is there were some minor grammar issues throughout. Nothing that negatively affected the reading experience, but just, little things that, you kind of come to expect these things on Royal Road. It's often we're writing these things very quickly and they're not really going through tons of editing or revisions. So that's absolutely comes with the territory and is not a problem at all. Some of the details felt like maybe they didn't need to be there. Something I'm guilty of in my own writing often as well. I think there's one part that stuck out in my head of she's getting up from her bed and it says that her bed is very high up off the ground. And that since the 4th grade, she's been fully capable of getting up into it by herself. And that was one of those details where I was just kind of I guess it furthers the world building, but is that something that could just be kind of cut? I don't think that's really gonna affect the story down the road. And I think that, oftentimes with our stories, that's something that editors will tell you is that, you gotta trim the stuff and only put the descriptions that, kind of lend to the story. But totally fine. Absolutely a minor thing. This is a really well-written first chapter, and I thought it was very, very interesting. All right, so that wraps up this first episode. Thank you for watching. If you watched all the way to the end, you are awesome for doing that. I know attention spans are short in the modern day and age, thanks to things like TikTok, where we're just like, scroll. So longer form things, if you make it through and you enjoy them, like books or movies or video reviews, then you're awesome. Give yourself a pat on the back. I hope that this dive into first chapters on Royal Road was fun to watch. And if any of these stories sound interesting, please click the links in the description to check them out. I thought they were all really neat. And as with any of these stories on Royal Road that aren't just like massive, like steamrollers, they could use more eyes and more love. So if you are interested in having your fiction featured on a future episode, quick reminder, the link to the submission thread is in the description. So go over to that forum post and drop your fiction, and maybe it'll end up on a future episode. Cheers, friends, and happy reading and happy writing. Thanks for watching.